right, Susan, I think you're muted.
No, I just tried to switch microphones and it's not working. So can now you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I don't know. It's weird. I have an external mic and it, for some reason, Google Meets doesn't like it. So, okay. So I know that the middle school math team's on and the high school math team's on. And then it looks like we have additional people. So who else is on? Is it special ed or is it?
So it looks like we have an assistant principal from the high school, a business teacher, and three instructional assistants from the middle school.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, welcome everybody, and it's good to see your faces. I wish I was there. And I would like to say I was an expert in this, but I too am figuring things out. Although I've been talking to lots of schools and getting lots of ideas and developing my own ideas as we move through remote learning. So could somebody just tell me, so this is what I gathered. You guys are 100% remote right now, right? And is it looking likely to stay that way, or is it for a quarter, or you don't know?
We're assessing every 4 weeks.
Okay. And the teachers are at school and the kids are at home?
Yeah, students don't start until next week.
Okay. Oh, so you guys haven't even started teaching yet?
No.
Okay. All right. So we started about over a month ago. So anyway, we can talk about that a little bit. And I have a daughter who's a junior in high school, so I'm seeing it from the other side as well. And they are actually in hybrid learning, so they're in school 2 days a week and at home 3. And I have to be honest, math has been pretty rough, even though she's in honors pre-calc. In terms of the way that remote learning is going for the kids in that class. And so much so that on Mondays, we have a tutorial at my house for all the kids in pre-calc. So I'm teaching pre-calc again on Mondays to all the kids. But I think, I'm learning some lessons from seeing it from the other side too. And maybe some ways we can make that better. So from the parent perspective. So let's get started. Let me figure out how to share my screen. I will apologize with you guys in advance because I am much more comfortable with Zoom than I am with Google Meets. So I am sure at some point here, I will have some trouble here. I did get the grid view thing to work, which is nice. Okay, so this is my contact info. Can you guys see my screen first of all?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. So this is my contact information, and you are always welcome, as the middle school team knows, because they avail themselves, to email me anytime you have questions or thoughts. Or I love it if you share student videos with me, because that's how we all learn. And in addition to that, the first thing on there is actually my website. And that is something that we have there's a lot of resources on there. And so you might want to just write that down if you've never been on there before. We're going to be talking about a few of the things on there, and some of the stuff is housed on that website. Okay. All right. And then there is a Facebook group if you're interested in joining, and a Twitter thing. All right. So the first activity we're gonna do is called Menti Meter, and I don't know if you've used this at all, but part of today I also want to model some tools that you could use in the classroom to help you do some assessment. So this is one of my favorites. It's free if you've never used it before. And so all you need to do is either go to www.menti.com and enter that code, or you can scan it with a second device. So, for sure, high school kids always have their second device with them. And you can just use the barcode to scan. So I'm just going to give you a second to get there. And we will go to the results here. Yeah, so I'm seeing a lot of things about student engagement, about being nervous about having to wear a mask on screen. I think that's reasonable. People are saying they feel like they understand more, that's good, than they did in the spring, and some of the technology you've learned over the summer has been helpful. Difficulties with access, good. Okay, so a lot of these are like about delivery. I'm wondering also a little bit about content. Will it change anything that you're doing in terms of the content that you're going to need to cover or that you're covering? Okay. All right. So I saw it won't change the standards, but it might change the way I teach them. Good. Okay. All right. Let me look at that. We'll look at that one more time. Let's see what else we got in there. Nice. More prepared to start with remote learning this year. Thinking about it. Okay, good. All right, thanks for participating in that. And I want to take a minute and kind of think about this. I think this is how a lot of us felt. I mean, maybe this is how I feel every school year, but I think a lot of us felt this way last spring. It was like, I thought this would be easy and we just turn over to the computer and it would be similar to what we did before. And in reality, we hit like some rocks and some things we figured out. And sometimes we felt like we were just stuck in a hole. And then hopefully we ended the school year feeling a little bit better. And what I kind of say is, last spring we were just in survival mode. It was just like, let's just figure this out. And week by week decisions were being made. But this year we have an opportunity to do things better. And so that's kind of what we're going to focus on today. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a second because I want to see your faces and I want to hear you guys I want to just hear a little bit of reflection from you about in terms of assessment, since that's really what we're here for today. What worked and what didn't work last year for you in terms of assessment, or what is your anxiety about assessment, or what are the things that you're worried about or hoping to get some feedback about. So I'm going to stop sharing just for 1 second so I can see you all. Okay, who wants to talk about that? Don't be shy.
Is the math department all together? Kathy had mentioned you might be.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well, that's why we have a little feedback. But because every day the teachers have been posting like a little bit of a reflection about the professional development, and from almost every member of the math department there was some anxiety or some concern, I suppose, about assessment, and particularly like how do we have valid assessment measures in a remote environment and make sure that they're really reflecting what students know.
Mm-hmm.
But anyone from the department can jump on and provide more detail because I'm only going by what I read in those reflection forms.
For me, I feel comfortable assessing online, but I know that there's a lot of different mediums to do that. And I think finding the best medium for the situation is where it takes a lot of time for me. as well as making sure that they can input the data that they need to. So if we're working on exponent rules, I want them to be able to use an equation editor, versus if we're graphing linear equations, I want them to be able to input a graph, and how to find the best medium is what was frustrating for me. We did, in 8th grade, we did transformations at the end of the year. And so we ended up making a paper packet, and students that couldn't print them out, I drove around to their houses, and then they took pictures and uploaded it, because there wasn't really it would have taken a lot longer to train them on something than to do it that way.
And I'll some of the tools that even I'll share with you don't have an equation editor, so that's like something to that's really like a real thing. Like you can't even put in a fraction, correctly. So that is something to be thinking about. I see a lot of people saying that they're worried about integrity, about student basically sharing answers, and honestly, that's something we'll talk about today, because if you're going to just give the test you've been giving, you have to give up on that. They are going to cheat. I mean, there's just the bottom line is they're going to use their phones, they're going to use their books. So my advice is we're not going to probably do the same kind of paper and pencil test that we've been doing. And we'll talk about what to replace that with, because their phone, they can just scan it with their phone and it tells them the answer now. So if you're worried about answer getting, you probably can't combat that piece, or who's at home helping them, that kind of thing, right? So, okay. I see somebody said something about class marker. I haven't used it. I'd like to know about it, Kathy. So maybe at the end you could share that with me. Okay. All right. So I just have a Google Meets question for you guys. Is when you're presenting on Google Meets, you cannot see the participants, right? When you present your screen, it's impossible. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. That's really.
I
go ahead.
think you can.
We can. I think you end up seeing them on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
Right.
So when I share a screen, I see it on the left. I see what I'm presenting on the left, and then I see the participants on the right.
For some reason with PowerPoint, it hides you guys if you're in full screen on PowerPoint. So if you guys don't mind, I don't know. I might get on it a second device. We'll see. But let me just see. For some reason, I have had this problem with PowerPoint before. If you present full screen, does anybody know? Change layout. Somebody said you can change layout. Okay, let's see. Sorry. Maybe that'll do it for me. Oh, maybe that's it. I have to do it on the sidebar. Let's see. Okay. Otherwise, I just can't see you. It's super annoying. So, all right, here we go. Let's see if that worked. Let's see when I share if I can still see you guys. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I think, what we really need to talk about here is a shift from what Tan called a quantitative approach to a qualitative approach. And I think in math, we've really been focused on this kind of quantitative approach of like, is the answer right? How much have the kids learned? Did I get through the material? And I think for remote learning, we really need to switch that to what I would call qualitative, or what he called a qualitative approach. And we need to start to be thinking about how can we assess whether or not students made sense of the material, and not how much did they learn, but how well did they learn it? And how are students making connections between the text? And I think, we're making those practices, we're shifting those practices in math in general, but for sure more in remote learning. If we stay on the left-hand side, the quantitative side, we're not going to get as good of information about kids as we are if we move to the qualitative side. And so that's kind of our goal for today, is to talk about like, how do we come up with assessment practices that look more at that quality of learning as opposed to the quantity of learning. Okay. So this just came out this summer. Jennifer Gonzalez interviewed this lady, Melanie Kitchen, and she's actually district coordinator for online technology in New York. And she basically said there's 9 ways that online teaching should be different. We're only going to talk about 5 of them. But one of the things she said is that the first week of school, you really shouldn't worry too much about content. You really want to be spending your time building community, having kids show up, making them know that you're glad they showed up, and teaching them how to use the digital tools that you're going to use during the year. We'll talk a little bit more about that. That if you are doing some synchronous and some asynchronous learning, all of the synchronous learning is when you should be doing anything that's active. So in other words, if we're doing any kind of inquiry model, or we call them anchor tasks in the middle school, that's the time to do new acquisition and also that kind of inquiry, because you just can't do inquiry if it's not face to face. Okay. We know that we need to simplify the content as much as possible, and in some cases actually slow some things down. Last year, we had the benefit, I think, of having remote learning be at a time of year when we had covered most of the critical content, but we don't have that benefit this year. And so we're going into the year in the position of having to cover really critical content in the remote environment, which is a little bit different than last year. She also said that we need to switch from traditional grading practices to what she calls feedback practices. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and I'll show you some examples of ways that we can gather feedback instead of gathering grades. Okay. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is that summative assessment should be focused on creating, basically like creating portfolios of work or creating exemplars of work, as opposed to completing a task. Okay, so those are the 5 of the 9. She has 4 other ones that have to do with parent communication and stuff. And if you're interested, you can look up her article to read the rest of them. But we're going to kind of use these 5 as our framework for today. All right. So the first week of school should be based on community building and digital competence. And so just a few things from my experience that I think you might need to think about. And the first one is that kids just need to know how to get into your digital classroom. And I don't know what your district has done in terms of this, but I'm going to tell you from a parent perspective. My daughter's school, they use Schoology. I don't know what you guys are using, but and the teachers were given, I think it was an effort to give teachers more flexibility. So teachers were sort of given a choice about Schoology and Google Classroom and where they're posting assignments and how they're due. And I feel like it's a lot to navigate for a kid and a parent, actually, but mostly for my kid, about like, this teacher does it this way, and this teacher does it this way, and this other teacher does it this way. And so when you go in, some teachers, you're using the assignment calendar, then that's really great. Some teachers aren't using that. They're posting everything in a syllabus. Some teachers are using Google Classroom. And it's very confusing, actually, for the kids. And so I think that's something that it's not really just departmental, it's sort of school-wide, like how do we all get on the same page about what it looks like from the user side. Something just as simple as some teachers are posting assignments based on their due date, and some people are posting their assignments based on their assignment date, the date that they assign it. Just something that simple was very confusing. So that's one of the things you might want to be thinking about, like what are your department policies on that, but more importantly, like what's your school-wide policy on that? Okay. Like I said, are the assignments on the calendar on the date assigned or the due date? I mean, that's just a simple thing, but very confusing. And then if I were you, there's a lot out there right now. And if you're on Twitter, you're on any Facebook group, people are throwing out a million ideas. And so what I would suggest to you is that you pick 3 tools you really like, and you teach those right away to the kids how to use them. And you stick with those 3 for the first 2 weeks of school. And you don't introduce anything beyond those few tools. And so I'm going to give you just the ones I use the most. I don't know if you guys have used ClassKick. We'll talk about that a little bit. If you use Google Slides, the kids all pretty much know how to use that. But Menti Meter, which is the one we just used, Flippity, which is another free Google Classroom aligned site, and then Flipgrid or Seesaw, one of those recording tools. So, and it sounds like you guys have another one. So just whatever they are, I would say no more than 3, and just use those really reliably the first couple weeks of school so that kids can acclimate to a particular tool. I know this sounds really stupid, but I am finding it really important for the kids to have some way to indicate yes or no very quickly in front of their camera. So you know, even when they use the thumbs up, thumbs down, like in Google Meets or Zoom, if you have 25 kids on there, it goes away right away, right? So just like a little paddle literally on a popsicle stick or something that they can hold up in front of the camera so that you can very quickly assess if they agree or disagree with something that you're talking about. And by the way, that should be number 4. I love that, how I'm doing a math presentation and my numbering is off. And then how to use a link in the chat, which we'll do here in a minute. But I think that's another really important tool for kids, is like, sometimes we expect them to go back out to the classroom to get a link. And I've just gotten in the practice of always putting it in the chat. It's just faster. It'll also be located in the Google Classroom, but it's just faster if they use it. And then this one, I looked at your website at the high school yesterday, and I was actually really impressed with the fact that you guys kind of did this where you set some personal time boundaries. Because I think this is something that we need to do both for parents and kids. And my daughter, you know, she sent an email to a teacher, and it was about a club, and she said, oh, well, she never got back to me. And I said, well, it was the weekend, you know, like she has little kids at home, and she's probably spending her time with her family, so good for her. But I think in this digital environment, we're all exhausted because, you know, people are getting emails at 10 o'clock at night and midnight. And I think that might just be something to talk to the kids about, you know, in terms of we're modeling healthy work-life balance. And 2, you have to protect yourself just a little bit from all of those time demands. Okay, so I just want you to think about these for just a second. I'm going to escape so I can see you again. And I just want to hear like your thoughts about which of these are you struggling with? What do you have questions about this first week kind of stuff? Because this time we have a chance to set this stuff up, right? So what do you guys think?
I feel like I have been taking a sip of water through a fire hose with all of the with all of the professional development and all the things that we've been introduced to. I'm most anxious about trying to figure out what are my 3 things. I also had thought that 3 would be a good number, manageable for me and manageable for my students. I'm not an expert on any of this. This is not really my forte. So that's what I'm most anxious about.
Okay, good. Yeah, and I think what you need, Lee, and honestly, when we'll look at a lot of them today, is you need some way for them to work together. So Jamboard is really good, something like that. You need a collaboration tool. You need a recording tool, right? Mm-hmm. And you need a presentation tool. So if you just pick one collaboration tool, one recording tool, one presentation tool, that's a good way to get started. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other thoughts about that setting up stuff up front? Yeah, Jim says it's so overwhelming. I totally agree. There's 8 million things, and you know, just become an expert on a few of them. Okay. Anything else, you guys? Other people, high school? Assessment and grading. Yeah. Okay. And Kathy asked, will I share it? Yes, I will share it. Okay. All right. Okay, let me jump back in there. Sorry, my stuff's in the way now. Hold on. Okay. All right, so let's talk about this idea of face-to-face should be for active learning. And I don't want to stay here too long because this isn't really what we're here about today, but there's basically 2 things that really have to be done synchronously. The first thing is every day that you meet with them live, you should have some kind of warm up or number sense activity. And the second thing are tasks that require inquiry. I met with a school yesterday. This is like, I don't know why they're doing this, but all of math is from 8 to 9 for every single kid. So it would be kind of like if you had taught Algebra 1, all of your sections. So they have 140 kids on a Zoom at the same time. And they said, you know, well, we really like these ideas, but like, how do we do inquiry with 140 kids? And I was kind of like, yeah, I don't know. You know, I don't know how to do that. So obviously that kind of situation is not ideal for this, but in general, what we're saying is that if you're going to use inquiry as a teaching method, which we've worked really hard to get that right into the math curriculum, I don't think we want to give that up, that we have to do that in a synchronous way. So that requires us to sort of shift to thinking that learning takes place in the process of finding the solution, not in finding the answer. So we need to kind of move to a place where we're less about answer getting and more about what's the process that kids are using. And that's really what we're going to be assessing, and also what we're going to need to be grading. You know, I think that like the geometry teachers, in a way, like it's already set up for you to do that. You know, if you think about like a proof, I don't know if you guys still teach proof-based geometry, but when you think about a proof, like we already give the kids the answer on the proof. What we're grading is, can you get from the start statement to the end, right? And so can you get from the, you know, the find to the given, and so, or the given to the find. So I think about that, and I think like, how can we teach the rest of math more like we teach geometry? Okay, so that's one of the things we'll be thinking about. So I want you guys to have a little bit of an experience with maybe a quick inquiry activity. And normally I would have done this through breakouts, but since Google Meets doesn't have breakouts, you guys are going to just be on your own here. And I might have to create a few more slides because I didn't realize how many people were going to be on. But let me get to the chat here. I'm going to throw this link in the chat. All right. When you get there, it should direct you to a Google Doc that looks like this. All right. Let me just make a few more because we have a few more people. So normally I would have kids doing this in groups, but until Google Meets decides to add that. So your job is just to find a slide and write your name on there. If you guys are together, some of you guys are together, I think, in the same room, you guys could be a group. That's how this was kind of intended to be done anyway. And the rest of you just find your own slide. And I want you to take a second. And so you'll see that the questions are down here in the bottom. And there's a series of questions I want you to work through. I provided some tools for you, which is you can move these squares or duplicate them, and circles to help you build the 8th design. So just hop on a slide that's not being used, stick your name on there, or names if you're in a group, and go ahead and get to work. You can put your answers in the bottom if you want, or in the top, doesn't matter. Remember, I want to see your work too, so please just don't put answers. Please work in the slide a little bit. Make sure you enter your names up there on the top. Oops.
I'm having trouble typing in the slide. I'm not really sure what I'm doing wrong.
You might have to create a text box. Like drag a text box down there. So letting you do that, Lee. What slide are you on? What number are you?
I was just working on, hold on. No, someone's already moving on that. I don't know.
You know what slide you're on?
Let me see. I'm having trouble going between the two. I think I was working on slide 5.
Somebody's there with you.
Oh, I can't.
People.
How can I tell that?
Well, the problem is I'm outside of your system. Everyone's anonymous to me. If you guys set this up in your classroom, you can see the kids' names. That's why I'm asking you guys to put the names in. But because I'm not in your system, it just says anonymous giraffe, whoever that is.
Okay. So I just have to.
Yeah.
I have to make a text box to put my name on it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are other people having trouble? No, Ben got it. I see. Kathy got it. So it's, yeah. I mean, I have been known to actually not share it with editing rights. So you have to be careful about that when you set these up. Make sure that kids have editing rights.
So what is the value of design edit? Each time.
Nice. Kathy, are you by yourself or you're working with a group? I think you're muted.
I'm by
Sorry.
myself.
Yeah. Okay. You're so far ahead. I was wondering. Okay. All right. How are we doing? All right, so I know not everyone's done here, and we will debrief this task for just a second, but give you about maybe 3 more minutes. So have you guys used Google Slides in this way yet? I really like it because I can see now, first of all, if you were in breakouts, it's a little better because I wouldn't have 28 slides to look at. But so this way I can see what everyone's doing. If you were in breakout rooms, you'd actually be able to talk to your team, right? And be problem solving together. So hopefully Google Meets will get that going here soon. But this is a tool that that has really changed sort of the ability to have kids do work for me live while I can watch. It's very fast for me just to flip between the slides and kind of see where people are. We're going to talk about Class Kick also, which is another tool I really love. For collaboration, I like this one better in terms of if you're doing group work, okay? But like I said, unfortunately right now on Google Meets, there's no way to do that, right? That still hasn't changed, right? I tried an extension last night that said you could do breakouts, but I couldn't get it to work. So I don't know. They say October is what I heard. Anybody have more information on that than me? No? Okay. All right. So let's just debrief this task really quick, even though I know some of you guys aren't 100% back. And Heather, you said you didn't think you could edit the slides, just the notes. Is that true? Did that end up being true in the end of that? Okay, you're not sure. All right. Okay, so let's just take a look at this question really quick, okay? And I'm just gonna pull up an empty slide to do that so that we can kind of talk through this. But actually, I'm gonna go back to my PowerPoint because I can write on it better. But let's just take a look at this picture. And I think the first question was like, what's the 8th design, right? So who could explain to me how you figured out what the 8th design was? Somebody just unmute yourself.
Each time it's going up by 5,000.
Okay, good. So some people just noticed like there's just this pattern where it's going up by 5,000 each time. And I saw some people made a table for that actually, which is kind of a nice way to do that. So you could just say that design number 1, we'll say it was 9,000 and design 2 was 14,000. And you could just sort of extend your table all the way up to, I think it was 44,000, right? What's the answer to that? Okay. All right. So is anybody noticing anything, making any observations about this table? As I'll keep writing with my mouse, which is slow, which is good because it gives you think time. Okay. Anybody noticing anything about this? I can't see the chat right now, so if you want to talk, that'd be better for me. I could see the chat, I guess, if I get out of full screen. Okay. Anybody notice anything? Hold on, I'm going to try to get on. This is bugging me, so I'm going to see if I can get on. I tried before, but I was getting feedback, so let me try it one more time. Just so I can see the chat at the same time. All right, so anybody, what do you notice about this pattern? Probably someone's going to have to unmute.
Circles go up by 1.
Okay, good.
Squares go up by 2.
So the circles match the design number. Good. So that helped us when we got to what does the 8th design look like, right? Okay.
Was that your question, Susan?
Sorry? Say that again.
Oh. Circles go up by 1.
Good.
Squares go up by 2.
Excellent. So every time we're adding what I kind of call like the battleship right here, we're kind of adding this shape each time we go up a design number. Okay, good. But if you just look at this table, does anybody notice a pattern in this table?
It's a linear pattern.
It is linear, okay. Meaning that it has a constant Slope, right? Okay. What else? I mean, maybe a little more basic. Anybody notice anything more basic?
It's going up by 5,000.
Yeah, 9,
4,
4, 9, 4, 9, 4. Okay. All right, good. And so if we had to predict, which was one of our questions, the 20th design, how would we know if it was going to be a 9 or a 4?
All of the even number designs end in a 4, and all of the odd number designs end in a 9.
Okay, so we know that the 20th design is going to be a 4,000. Good. And the other one we had to figure out was the 101st. And we could see that that was probably going to be a 9,000 because of what you just said, which was it was odd, right? Okay. Anybody have any idea how we might be able to figure out the leading digits from this pattern?
It looks like it's 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3. So the next one would be 4, 4.
Okay. And what would the 20th be?
It would be 10. Whatever the even is, you divide it by 2, and that's the leading digit.
Okay, so the even partner in the pair, I guess, right? If you divide it in half, that digit, you're going to get the leading digit. So following that, what would this leading digit be? Or digits in this case.
So the 100 would be 50.
Oh, what? Sorry. Oh, geez. Oop, my big mouth.
What do you guys think about that? Did we have to actually find the rule? Did we actually need to figure out what one circle and one square was to find the pattern? Not really, not until we got to the nth, right? Only when we needed to find the nth term. Then we maybe needed to know the value of them, right? So we need to think about that because this is what we would call a low floor, high ceiling task, right? It's low floor because really, honestly, this is a 4th grade problem, okay? Although I could see using it even in pre-calc. But because from a 4th grader's perspective, they could just keep extending this pattern and hopefully notice this, right? Becomes a high school problem when you ask them to find the nth term. Okay, so this is the kind of thing we want to do synchronously, right? Because in order to have this experience and be able to talk through the solutions, we kind of have to be face-to-face with the kids. Okay, all right. So the next thing that we want to talk about is that content has to be simplified. And in order to do that, the very first thing we have to do is figure out what truly is critical. And I know you might feel like everything you teach is critical, but the standards actually give us some guidance on what is critical and what's not critical. And we have to get to the place this year where we know that we're going to think about the critical content as mastery objectives and the non-critical content as just exposure. Okay, so we'll talk about where to find that in a minute. Then once we've done that, we need to consolidate the content that we're teaching. In other words, we're going to have to use fewer problems to try to achieve the same outcomes. And the best problems have either multiple methods or multiple solutions. So we're looking for problems that one problem could be done in multiple ways, so we could get multiple concepts across, like that one we just did. You could have done a table. You could have, a lot of people like to draw it. You could have just right away found out that the circle is worth whatever it was, 1,000, and the square is worth 2,000, or vice versa. I forgot. There was many ways to do that. Okay, that one happened to be multiple methods, one solution. All right. And then the last thing we want to think about is, like I said, what things is it okay if the kids can just recognize? What do they need to be able to produce themselves? And where would we want to think about extensions? Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to focus on now. So identifying the critical content. So NCTM came out with a statement this year, basically with some critical beliefs about learning math. And the first one is that, common shared learning experiences benefit kids. So that to me is a big challenge for remote learning, because if everything we're doing is asynchronous, it's not a shared learning experience. Okay, so these are things we're trying to preserve in the remote environment. All right. The second thing is that all children should have access to grade level content, meaning that we need to make sure that we're not preventing kids from accessing content that's appropriate to their grade level. Okay. And the third thing is that intervention in math has to focus on what's happening in the grade level curriculum and shouldn't just be about fact practice or procedure practice. And I think that's going to be even more important now because we're going to have less face-to-face time with our kids in intervention.
Susan, can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
So belief number 2, all children should have access to grade level math content. 100% agree, like no question there. But how should we go about addressing any of the gaps that they had from the previous year because we may not have gotten through everything to the same rigor?
Right. So I think one of the things we're going to have to do is more pre-assessment, right? Like we're going to have to be better and more deliberate about assessing for readiness for content. But on the other hand, I think we're also going to have to just weave that into the instruction. And I mean, I can just, like I said, I've been working with my daughter in pre-calc a lot lately, and they never got to trig identities last year at the end of Algebra 2 trig. I think they did it like after remote learning. And so it's still really shaky for her, I would say. She hasn't come to that yet in pre-calc, but I can tell you it's going to be a problem, right? So if I were her pre-calc teacher, and I mean, she's a straight A student, so she's, you know, she's conscientious. Most of her friends didn't do anything last spring because they were told that grades didn't matter. So their grades couldn't go down, so they didn't do anything. But she did do the work. And one of the things that I noticed was that she went straight for memorization and no meaning, right? And now I'm watching these videos that her math teachers are putting out to help the kids, and they're all focused on procedure and not on meaning, right? So I think that's one of the things that we're going to have to go back is and check ourselves to say, am I going back to explain the why, not just the how in some of those missing concepts? Because we might have assumed that the why was really deep for the kids last year had they been in the classroom, and the teacher, you know, we would have explained the why to them, and then we would have practiced the how. But I think that's what got lost in remote learning was the why. And it became a lot of just like, this is how you do it. So I think that's one of the things that we're going to have to think about focusing on is how do we get that concept development back in? Because I think most of us like sort of let that go in the spring. Because it's really hard to do in remote learning. So that's, I think, what we'll think about. But hopefully we'll talk more about that as we go. I don't know if I really answered your question, but so I think, you know, this is one of the things we need to think about is that the critical content's the same. And I think somebody actually said this at the beginning. It's just we need to think about the way that we're allocating our time on it. It's like the standards haven't changed, right? But like, how are we going to address them and do them in honestly less face-to-face time than we would have had with the kids live. This is kind of based on Skemp's theory of instrumental versus relational understanding. And what that means is, if you've never heard of this before, but Skemp talks about the idea that when we teach kids just how to do things, we're teaching them what he called instrumental understanding. And the best example I can give you guys is like, we went to London last year with the kids for the summer, and not for the whole summer, but for a few weeks. And we'd come out of the hotel every day and I'd be like, okay, well, where's the tube stop? And they'd all get on Google, you know, on their phones and be like, okay, let me put that in Google Maps. And they'd follow the directions. And at the very first day we were at the hotel, I went to the desk and I said, can I have a map? Right. And my kids were so embarrassed. They're like practically, you know, hiding on the other side of the lobby because I wanted a map. And so I'm looking at the map, and every day I'm using the map to get there. And the last day we walk out of the hotel and I said to the kids, okay, let's go to the tube. And they're like, oh, well, let's put in Google Maps. And I said, well, I don't need to put it in Google Maps because I know it's 3 blocks down and 4 blocks to the right, you know? And the kids were like, well, how do you know that? And I said, because I've been looking at a map. Okay. So what had happened is the kids had developed instrumental understanding. It worked to get them from point A to point B. They could follow the procedure that they were given on Google Maps. But what they couldn't do, right, what they didn't have is an overall sort of lay of the land. Okay. And so what I had developed was relational understanding. I understood how things were related to each other. I could see the space between the understanding instead of just the content itself. And that's what we really, our goal is to build relational understanding, not instrumental understanding. Okay. So I'm going to send this to you guys. I don't want to spend a ton of time on these slides, but I just want you to know that this is for Math and Focus 2020 for my middle school people. But the book was reordered to put the critical content up front, which I think you guys know. And so I will send this to you. It's also on my website. You can just download it from there. But, you know, we're going to see a lot of critical content in the first 4 chapters of the book. And so unfortunately, that's probably also when we're going to 100% be in remote learning. Same thing for 8th grade. And then for the high school, if you guys are looking for guidance on that, you really have to go to the PARC model content frameworks, which by the way, were revised recently, like in 2017. They came out originally in 14, and then 3 years later, they revised them. So this is the revised version, and this is how you can get them. But, and you'll see what your green content is. Okay. So what I'm going to say is this year, we're going for mastery of the green content. We are going for exposure, right? For exposure on some of the blue content. And then, you know, we're going to work hard on putting the yellow content in there as well. Okay. So just be kind of thinking about that as you go. And like I said, I will send you this and you'll have the link, but I think this might be something as a department you guys want to talk about, and like, where does it fall in your book, and you know, how is that structured in the materials that you're using? Okay. All right. So one of the ways to do that is to think about all of the skills that are required in order for a kid to actually understand some content. So we're going to go to one of my next favorite tools, which is called Flippity. And hold on for a second, because I got to get back to this Google Meets. And I'm going to share this with you guys, this link. All right. So in the chat, there should be a link for you. And when you get in there, you should see something that looks kind of like this. And let me actually go to the link myself. Actually, I'll do it here. Okay. So hopefully it's working here. Are you guys able to get in? It's spinning for me. Spinning for you too, Jim?
I just got in.
Okay, finally. It took a while. I don't know what the deal is with that. Okay, so your job is to take these, and I want you to sort them in the order that you think they need to be taught. Right now, they're just in a big pile. I just want you to go from top to bottom. What's the first thing you'd have to teach? Next thing, next thing, next thing, next thing. Now think about, like, I could do this activity for like the steps in solving an equation, right? Or something like that, where the kids have to sort, or any kind of sort. Okay. Heather, you still can't get in. I don't know. It spun for me, and then it finally did it. Let me try posting that. Were other people able to get in? Nope. Yep. So it's like half and half. It's weird.
I'm in.
You're in now. Okay. I don't know, it was slow loading. All right, so I don't know if everyone was able to get in, but just, I want you to just think about, like, what would you put first here, you guys? Sometimes it's actually easier to start with last. Like, what's the end goal and all of this?
Identify the axis.
Identify the axes. Okay, good.
And then the origin.
And then maybe they need to locate where the origin is.
Locate an ordered pair.
Mhm.
Locate an ordered pair. Okay.
Mhm. Plot a point on the coordinate plane.
Okay, good.
I would have identified a point on the line.
I wonder if you have to actually be able to identify a line before you could identify a point. I don't know. Maybe they go like this. I'm not sure.
It's not typically the way we teach it. We usually have them like just points that aren't on a line. They just grab it and say, this is the ordered pair.
Yeah, I don't know if this just means like if you gave them a bunch of lines and said which one's line A,
Okay.
or if this means like identify the form of the line. Does that make sense? Like those would be two different things, but yeah. All right. What would you guys put next?
Yeah, the table of values.
Mm-hmm. So given the graph, fill out a table. Then given the table, fill out the graph. Those could probably go in either order. Okay. All right.
Then I could identify a line.
Yeah, you'd put it here actually, right?
I guess it's subjective to how you teach it.
Yeah. Okay. For point two reasons I wanted to do this with you guys. One is I wanted you to see how you might use Flippity, which is super simple. It's like one of the easiest tools to use because it's a template and all you do is fill in the things you want on these cards and it automatically generates it for you. You don't have to understand how it works, honestly, or do any work. All you do is take the template, change the words that were here to the words or numbers or equations or what steps you want, and then it creates a sort. So you could do a lot of different things with this, I think, with kids, like you could have them sort shapes by attribute, you could have them sort equations, you could have them, there's lots of different ways. But the other thing I wanted you to do is to think about the steps that it really takes to get them to the end, right? And so making sure that we're targeting activities towards each one of these steps. And this is kind of back to that gap question that we were talking about, right? Like, how do you address the gaps? Because in order to address the gaps, I actually have to know all of these steps to get there, right? Because I'm not going to have time to jump back to this if we're here and the kid has misunderstanding and really all they needed to do was go back here. Does that make sense? And then I could build back up from there. I don't have time to go back to the beginning and build back to the end. Okay, so we're going to want to do just a little bit deeper analysis about how to do this. And luckily, there's a tool that does that for us, which is from the state of Ohio. And if you go on my website, I have a link to it, but it's under great teaching tools on my website, which is being funny. Right here, it says the Ohio Extended Learning Standards Progression. And if you go there, they have already done sort of that breakdown for all grades and all topics. So if I click algebra, it tells me like, here's the standard. This is what it would look like right below that and right below that and right below that. And then here's the things it takes to even get to the lowest level. Okay, so they've already done all of that breakdown for you. So you don't have to recreate that wheel like I just did. But you can see really closely like what's the scaffolding and build up to the mastery standard. Okay, so that's one of the things we kind of want to be thinking about is like, how do we consolidate or this content and say like, well, what can be taught together, what can't be taught together, what actually needs to be discrete there. Okay, all right. I want you just to think about that in another way. I'm going to be in the position this year of maybe using 3 problems where in the past I would have used 30. Okay. So I want you guys to think about this. If you were using these 3 problems, what order would you teach them in? And I actually like this as an assessment question for kids. Like, I think this is a good quiz question to say to the kids, here's 3 equations. X is equal to 7 in all of them. Which order would you put them in if you had to teach them? And why? It's going to tell me a whole lot about what they know about solving these equations. So what do you guys think?
3y plus 4 equals 2x first.
Okay, and that is what the kids are going to say too. But actually, I don't think it's the easiest one. Why are you saying you're saying that? Because it doesn't have a fraction, it doesn't have, right?
I would do the one on the left first
Yeah, how come?
because it's already solved for y.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, if you already know the value of x, isn't this one just like simple arithmetic? Right? I mean, it's 1. I mean, you do it in your head, right? What about this one though? This ends up actually being like a 2-step equation, doesn't it? When you solve it. And then this one, why are all the kids afraid of this one? Which I don't like this extra period in there. That's confusing. But why do you think all the kids are afraid of this one?
Decimals.
And fractions in the same problem. Okay. So how often are you doing that? Are you giving the kids decimals and fractions in the same problem? So I think, like, if we're going to think about alternative forms of assessment, we want to give kids things like this, where they have to determine something about a set of tasks and explain their rationale. Okay. So it might be like, solve each one and explain to me the order that you would teach them in if you had to go down and teach them to a 4th grader. Right? I'm going to learn a lot more about a kid than if I just give them a quiz with these 3 problems on it. Okay. All right. Again, we want to work on problems where we have multiple methods or multiple solutions. Okay. So I want you to think about like this one here, where, you know, I might ask the kids 2 questions. What real world situation might this represent? And find 3 different ways to solve it. So we're going to go into Jamboard. If you guys haven't used Jamboard, this is a really great tool for remote learning. Again, free, again, easy to use. So let's take a look at this one really quick here. If I can get my chat back, see if you can get in here. Jamboard is a shared tool where we're all going to be on the same board. Okay. One thing I like about it a whole lot is that I can set it up in advance and it can have multiple slides. So if I wanted my next problem right on the next thing, I can just flip over to the next problem. So, okay. So your job here is to choose a sticky note and write your method. So you choose a sticky over here. You just grab one and you throw it on here. You write it out and then you throw it on there. You can just write on it with a pen. Yeah. Nice. Good. Now, see, one of the things I like about this now is we could sort these methods. So like this person said multiply by 10 and so did they. So I can just say, great, we got a couple people who said that. Multiply by 10, we got another person who said that. Guess and check. Nice. Yeah, it's kind of in between those two. Okay. All right. So the other thing is you all can write on it. So grab a pen and just try. You'll see what I mean, because everyone in the class can pick up a pen. Yep. There you go. And in this way, we have a shared whiteboard, a shared space that we can work. Does it make the kids, no. Normally, it's like I said, the only reason you guys are anonymous is because I'm not in your school. So if you had set this up, because it's a Google product, if you had set it up through your Google Classroom with your emails from your school, you would see the kids' names. Okay, this is called Jamboard. One nice thing about Jamboard is you can just cut and paste like problems from the book like I did here. Yep.
Susan, would the students be able to see their names too?
Yeah,
Okay.
which is good. I think accountability. And can you lock it so they can go ahead in the slides? Yeah, so they can actually, like, if you guys change slide, you can change your own slides right now, so you could keep moving, even though we're having a discussion about this. But you can also change the sharing rights. So right now you guys all have editor rights, but I could make it so that you did not, that you just had viewing rights. So, but in terms of having a shared workspace, I think this is one of the best, right, for a whole class. Especially if you want to do a quick response like this, like grab a sticky, you know, sometimes I'll do sorts, right? Like, do you agree or disagree, and grab your name, you know, write your name on a thing and move it over, that kind of thing. Okay. Yep. You can put shapes in. It's fun watching you guys experiment in here. Again, it's part of the Google Suite, so it talks to your Google Classroom. If you have the paid version, I believe it's always the same code. So I have the free version, so every time it generates a new code. So I said, can you make it so they can't see each other's names? You probably can probably, or give them a code name. This is another one where I could do groups if I could do breakouts. Okay. All right, so that one's called Jamboard. I'm going to close it, so you guys are going to lose your little access to it. Okay, there we go. All right. So again, another way to kind of share our methods. Okay. The next thing I want to talk to you guys about is this idea of what is recognition, what is production, what is extension, because you know, again, like at what level do kids need to know it for you to feel like you can check off that they understand it? Okay. So for me, like recognition is a task like this, right? Can they just match the net to the solid? And am I okay with saying that they've mastered it if they can match? And that's what you're going to want to think about with your content, is there's some things that I'm just okay if they can just recognize it. For instance, it might be like a graph on a line. Like, is it okay if they can just recognize it, or do they actually need to produce it themselves? So in other words, this would be production then. Now, not just match the net, but also find the volume or something like that, right? As opposed to extension, where I want to think about like, what topics do I need the kids to actually be able to explain their thinking on? Okay. So you might be looking back at your learning and say to yourself, is this something I'm okay? I'm just going to be okay with everyone being able to recognize it, and I'm going to move on. Is this something I really feel like everybody needs to produce themselves? Or is it something that I really feel like kids should have deep understanding and they should be able to extend their thinking? And maybe it's not all kids, maybe some kids I need to do that for. And that might also have to do if it's an honors class, right? Like if it's an honors class, I'm definitely going to want them to be at the level of extension before I'm ready to move on some topics. Okay. And I have some kids in every class that I want to force to that stage. Okay. So I want you just to take a look at these three problems and see if you can figure out which one is a recognition task, which one's a production task, and which one's an extension. Three different ways I could assess those. What do you guys?
Is that the largest it goes?
Sorry, say that again.
It's a little hard to see. Can we zoom in?
I don't know. I think for me, it's like full screen, so I don't know. Can other people see it? Let me just read them to you. This one says, a cylinder has a conical cavity. The dimensions of the cylinder are shown. What's the volume? And they get three choices. So what do you guys think? Is that recognition, production, or extension? In your mind. Just type it, in the chat or say it out loud.
Production?
Actually recognition, because the answers are given to them.
Okay.
And they just have to recognize the correct answer. So that's the lowest form of learning. I can just recognize the correct answer. And I hate to keep using my daughter as an example, but I took a quiz with her the other day. I watched her take a quiz and she was really lost. And I finally just said, it's all multiple choice. Just plug the answers in and see if they work. You know what I mean? Like she didn't really have to know how to factor them, but she could just plug in the values for X. And see if the values of X work. It's a recognition task. Okay. This one is production, right? Now it's kind of the same thing, but we're saying now you find the volume of the surface area open-ended, right? And then this is the extension, because not only do they have to do that, but then they also have to find the surface area of just the rind after you took the scoop out, after you took the flesh out. That's much more difficult, right? Okay, so we kind of want to be thinking about that. Now, I love this watermelon question because it does both. Part A is just produce it, find the volume, right? And part B is now think about this weird surface area. Okay, so I think, we're better off giving one good question to find out their level on lots of things. Okay, so we're going to talk now about like switching to giving feedback instead of grading. Okay, so what this is from Singapore. What we say basically is that assessment is the link between teaching and learning. Okay, and it should be student centric. So it should primarily, the goal of assessment is formative and diagnostic. Okay. And in order to do that, we have to give the kids good feedback, and it has to be timely. And I think that's really hard for you guys in remote learning to give it quickly when 150 kids might submit something, on the same day. Right. And it has to inform the kids of where they are and what they need to do, but it also has to inform you about learning gaps. Okay. So I want to kind of talk about that. This is my daughter. Here she is. And her teacher, I really like this. Their attendance grade every day is based on them recording about a 30-second flip grid on what they understood and what they didn't understand from the homework. Okay, so let me I got her permission to play this for you guys. She's not thrilled, but here you go. Ready?
The topic that I understand very well is translations and reflections and other changes in the graphing, as well as how to graph the base functions. But what I'm still a little bit confused about is what makes a function even or odd. So I might need to do some review on that. Thank you.
So what do you guys think of that? That's what every day, every kid has to record just a very quick, basically reflection about what they understood from the homework and what they didn't understand. And that is their homework grade now. Give me a reaction to that. What do you guys think? This is Flipgrid, by the way. Yeah, I love it too. I mean, first of all, you give like this personal touch with the kid for a minute, right? By the way, she's wearing her nightgown, which we all thought was really funny. I said, did your teacher realize you were still in your pajamas, when you took that, did that video? But I think it's really great, right? You feel a little connected to her in that, but she also really had to explain, like, this is what I understood. This is what I didn't understand. And now I need some help. And that to me was way faster than grading her paper that she may or may not have had help on, right? Plus it also forced her to do the metacognition and accountability. So if they don't do this video, they are counted absent that day. So there you go. And also it's turning her into a reflective, math thinker. Okay. All right. So let me show you another example of that. Well, no, before we do that, I'm going to skip this actually, because we don't have so much time, but I do want you guys, I was going to do another flippity thing, but I want you guys to think about, like, what does it take when you're solving a problem? Okay. And this is what we want to think about with assessment. Like, what part of problem solving are we assessing? And so what do we do when we solve a problem? Well, the first thing is we have a real world problem, right? And I think that one of the problems that we've had in math, one of the difficulties we've had in math, is that we've taken it out of the real world. And sometimes, I mean, I'll admit it's hard to come up with a real world example of like adding two absolute value equations. I mean, that's hard to come up with a real life example of that. But I think in remote learning, the more we can connect it to the real world, the better we're going to be. All right. So we give the kids a real world problem, something we're trying to solve for real. Okay. And we formulate a mathematical model to help us solve this real world problem. So that's the first thing a kid has to be able to do, is translate a real world problem into a math equation. Okay. The next thing they have to be able to do is actually solve the model that they came up with and come up with a mathematical solution. But that's not quite good enough, because after that, then they have to interpret their solution back into the real world and see, did it solve their real world problem? And then finally, like I said, they have to reflect about whether or not it solved their problem. And if it didn't solve the real world problem, we have to go through that whole cycle again. Okay. And thinking about this problem solving paradigm, I think, is what's going to help us assess kids better. Because any one of these places could be a breakdown for a kid, right? Like they can't get the math equation out of the problem, or they can't solve the math equation, or they can't interpret it back and then reflect about their mistakes. Okay, so these are 4 different places we could sort of target assessment. Okay, so I'm going to give you, this is from 2nd grade actually, but I think it's a great example of using video for kids to explain their thinking. All right. So I always say good assessment literally takes 59 seconds. In 59 seconds, you guys are going to decide whether or not these kids knew what they were doing. Okay. So this is the scenario. They were given this real world problem. This kid is having guests for lunch, and he has a recipe that only serves 4. And he has to figure out how much of each ingredient would he need if he had 8 people instead of 4. Okay. So I'm going to let these girls explain to you how they got their solution. Okay. Here they go.
We used the counter box to help us figure out the answer. We multiplied every number on the chart to fit with its thing. And then we figured out that the answer is 26. Dun, dun, dun.
Okay, so it's super adorable, right? 26, dun, dun, dun. Okay, but I want you to think about this scenario, right? And
we used the
where did their breakdown occur? So they said they multiplied, they took each ingredient, they multiplied it by 2, and they got 26. All right, so I'm going to let you look at the problem again really quick here. So what do you guys think? In terms of our problem solving paradigm, were they able to understand what they needed to do? Yes, they knew they needed to multiply, and they were able to multiply, but then what happened?
They weren't able to interpret it into, yeah, you need 26 items, whatever that is, but not 26 of each item.
Yeah, or 26 what, right? You know, so you can see that like that breakdown occurred here, right? The math was all good, but they couldn't get it back to the real world, right? And I figured that out in 59 seconds, one video. I just was able to assess where they were. Does that make sense to you? That's why these videos, I think, can be pretty effective. Okay, that was from Seesaw. All right, have you guys used ClassKick at all? Do you know what it is? No? Okay, to me, this is one of my 3, all right? So I am going to have you guys go to this, hold on, let me escape so I can put it in the chat. I'm going to have you just quickly go to this login in the chat. ClassKick allows me to watch all of you work simultaneously, okay? It's unbelievable tool, and I can throw any PDF into it. So anything you could download from your textbook as a PDF, I can just throw into ClassKick, and I can watch all of you guys work on it simultaneously. So you might have to log in. I hope you don't have to log in. Let's see. Oh, no, you should just be able to put in your code once you get there. Let me log into mine so you can see it from the teacher side as well. My internet is a little slow today. I don't know about you guys. I may not be able to show you guys right now. I don't know what it's doing. Hold on. Usually it works really great, so I don't know what it's doing. Were you guys able to get in? Yours is still loading too. Of course, it's going to be down right now.
What's the code?
It should be there. In that link. It's N. Didn't it autofill it for you? N6F9.
Yeah. Okay. And then just put my name in. Okay.
Yeah, but I'm having trouble getting to my site. I don't know what it's saying. I'll try one more time. I'll try reloading. Let's try from the. I'll try to log in. Sometimes it just. Normally I would log in before class, you guys, but it wasn't working. So I just. Let's see. Were you guys able to get in there? There we go.
Still loading.
Yeah, I don't know. It's being slow today. I am worried about. Okay, here we go. So eventually, anyway, we ever get in here, and I know we're almost done running out of time, so I don't want to sit here for too long. But this is something definitely worth looking at. I don't know what it's doing. Well, we'll come back to this. I'm just going to let it load, and we'll come back to it. So Class Kick, basically, just so you guys know, what it does is it allows you to have all kids working on an assignment at the same time. Okay? Did anybody ever get in there? No? It's still just loading. Yeah, I feel like there's something wrong with it today. I wonder if it's down. Welcome to remote teaching, right? Oh, there we go. Jeez. Okay. So what happens is you can preload your kids in a roster, but it will basically, it duplicates an assignment for every single kid, and they can all work on it simultaneously while you watch. You can also come in and help a kid on an assignment in there. So I don't know if you guys were able to get in. I finally got to the class, but it's still loading. I don't know. Oh yeah, you got in there and I just refreshed, which was done. Let's see if I can get back there.
None of us have been able to get in.
I think like 6 people were in, right?
Not me.
I saw Anna right before I unloaded it. All right. So anyway, if it ever loads, I'll go back in there. It's loading while I'm talking to you anyway. So okay. So then the last thing I wanted to just talk to you guys about is that summative assessment really needs to be about creation of tasks. Okay, that kids are creating things. And you know, Einstein said, like, it's not that I'm so smart, it's just that I work on problems longer than other people. Okay, and so we want to think about like these good quality tasks. Like if we're assessing, I would rather give the kids one task like this where they have to consider a graph and then answer a bunch of questions about it. Does that make sense? Like find an equation for it, then interpret it, interpret the 2 functions and the rate of change, and then answer a real life question. Which machine should the manager buy based on what you just did? I want to give the kids one good question. They can either record their response, right? Or write their response. And that's all I'm going to do for assessment on functions. Okay, because I can get all the information I need from one good problem. Or here, something like this. Emma's 1.5 meters tall. She wants to find the height of the flagpole. How could she find the height? By adjusting her position. So the kids have to explain to me, how did they go about solving this problem? And that's all I'm going to do for assessment, are sort of these constructed tasks. Okay. So looking for these good tasks for you guys from Math and Focus, these were right from the enrichment. I can just do one good enrichment task and find out what they know. All right. And I want to tell you guys like how I learned this lesson, and it had nothing to do with remote learning. It had to do with teaching AP statistics. And I had given the kids a performance assignment for the end of the semester. And I said, I want you to do a study with the kids in the class. And they were supposed to do 100 kids or whatever. And I said, you know, and you have to do the whole statistical analysis. So the kids they get up and they're doing their presentations, and they say, this group gets up and they say, we decided to study the number of hours of sleep versus kids' GPAs. And I'm like, that sounds like a pretty interesting thing to see, you know. And they said, so here's our data. And in general, you know, the more sleep people got, there was sort of an upward trend, you know, and their grades were better. And I was like, great, that sounds like a great study. And they go, oh, we're not done. They said, you know, they said, and here's our data without the liars. And I was like, what? And they said, yeah, you told us to throw out the kids who weren't telling the truth. And I said, you mean the outliers? And they were like, yeah. They said, you said throw out the liars. Okay. And I always say, like, that's the day I realized that it's not what I taught. It was what they walked out with. Now, if I hadn't given them that kind of open-ended task, I would have never known that that's what the kids thought I said. Throw out the liars. Okay. Unfortunately, that was after they took the AP exam, you know, so that wasn't so great for me. But I want you guys to kind of think about that like if we're in assessment, we're really trying to get at what they learned, not at what we taught, right? Okay. So can you guys just quickly in the chat tell me, like, what's your big takeaway for today? What's one thing that you concept that struck you or stuck with you, and what's a tool that you want to try from today? Yeah, stop sharing so I can actually see you. Maybe. Maybe I can see you. There we go. By the way, on my website, there's a link set that says my favorite remote learning tools. And there's a link to ClassKick, Menti, Flipgrid, the ones that I use the most. Okay. Flippity. We didn't use this one today, but the virtual manipulative tool, which is called Braining Camp, is also linked to that. Yeah, Kathy said some of these activities I can see using, like, even when they're back and having to sit 6 feet apart, right? Yeah, I agree, because I think it's still going to be challenging, right? Okay, good. All right, questions, you guys? People are still typing in the chat, and I appreciate that, but questions, final thoughts? I don't know about for you guys, but for me, that went really fast. It's like, oh, that's a fast hour now.
Susan, you'll share this with us.
Yeah.
And if you had anything else, like a good grading tool. Sorry that I have an echo.
Yeah. So I don't think I showed you this, and I thought it was in there. So hold on. I do have, so, you know, I think that middle school people, we looked at this. We looked at using some more holistic rubrics in the past, right? And I think this might be the year for them, you know, like and then like that's all the feedback, where it's a double sort of sided rubric, where it's like, we're going to talk about both problem solving, how you're doing in problem solving, and how you're doing in concepts and skills. Does that make sense? And giving the kids 2 different grades for that. So I know the middle school people have it already, but I can share that with the high school about some of the work we've been doing with that and some other schools about trying to give the kids more of a synthetic grade, where it's partially problem solving and partially just skills. Okay. And please share with me what you're doing, because one of the ways I'm learning is because I work with so many schools, I'm getting ideas from every school, right? And I'm able to kind of put those together for you guys. Other ideas? All right. So, thanks so much for spending your morning with me, and I will send Anna the PowerPoint as soon as we get off, and then you guys will have that to reflect on. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. See you guys. Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Susan.
This was awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure.